I'm now delighted to welcome Holly Shaffer, who's very well known to us here at Yale. She did her PhD here and also worked very closely with us here at the Center and curated a wonderful exhibition with Gillian Forrester called Adapting the Eye, an Archive of British India. And she's now a Mellon postdoctoral fellow in the humanities at Dartmouth. Well, welcome back, Holly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martina, and for everyone here. (1887) marked the 50-year golden jubilee of Queen Victoria's reign of Great Britain. Here we see one official portrait in the format of a cabinet card. One of many by Alexander Bassano in which Victoria's head rotates from profile to three-quarter to full face, the lens pulled in close or receding to accept the voluminous lace. Queen Victoria's image easily translated across media. A bust and photographic images woven in silk are just two examples, but two that, along with the photograph, equally and easily translated Britishness across geography. As Empress of India for 10 of those 50 Jubilee years, we see her form, especially in this crown and costume, replicate in similar fashion. Two statues, for instance, adorn a museum in Nagpur, India. Both have lost limbs, but not that which holds the globe. In this talk, I focus on the movement of Victoria's photographic image in three stages. The first is the series with which I started by Bassano of the Queen and Empress. The second, to which I will now turn, is an album produced by the Poona Photographic Company after 1887, and the third is a room of painted portraits in Gwalior. While Victoria's image stays recognizable in reproduction, its singular attachment to the Queen seems to wane and transform from monarch to revolutionary, loosening in its indexicality in each media and context. Poona is situated a couple of hours from Mumbai on the western coast of central India. The Poona Photographic Company was in the center of the city in a colonial Gothic confection with tri-lobed arches. This photograph of the company opens the album I will focus on, simply titled Victoria Photographic General. Now in the collection of Anil Rilya in Ahmedabad, it was presented to the Maharaja of Indore, a region further north. Since pages remain in other Maharajas' collections, it's likely that these were bound and presented to high-ranking Indian rulers of the time. The album contains a remarkable series of composite photographs, which we see on the right. In each, Queen Victoria is in the center. Her image seems to be a halftone reproduction of the albumen cabinet card portrait by Bassano, which has then been inserted into an elaborate ornamental frame and rephotographed. If this image structurally follows that which we saw earlier of Victoria surrounded by the leaders of her government, which we see on the bottom left, or of contemporaneous genealogies of Indian royal families on the bottom right, or of aggregated albums of Indian princes made for her accession as Empress of India, then Victoria indeed rules from the center of a diagram of subservience and loyalty. However, unlike such comparisons, the figures in the Poona photographic album are far more aspirational. They reveal a desire on the part of a regional population to participate in a network of empire, of a Britishness that they imagine. Alongside British officials, who we see on the far left, Victoria is surrounded by princes of local states in Western India, Parsi industrialists in Bombay, photographers, reformers, and scholars. Yet the images themselves seem to note layers of remove. The image of Victoria, as well as of the British officials on the left, have been copied so frequently, or their original source had been so weak, that they register a physical and figurative loosening of the ties of empire, even as they visually embrace its form. Indigenous printing on a mass scale had only recently been inaugurated in Poona with the Chitrashala press. The Poona photographic album sits squarely within its tradition and accords with its potential for revolution. In 1878, the publisher and eminent Marathi essayist Vishnu Shastri Chaplunkar founded the Chitrashala to ensure, as he wrote, and I quote, that the figures of men famous in history would remain for a long time, end quote, through printing their portraits. Chaplunkar at once sought to counter a colonial ban on native access to materials, especially those related to the Marathas, the last dynasty to fall to the British in 1818, while also inspiring interest in those materials to foster nationalist sentiment. He lamented that British museums housed hundreds of objects taken from India, including the famous tiger claw weapon of the first king of the Marathas named Shivaji, which, and I quote, pierced the enemy's heart, end quote. The Chitrashala was also aimed to pierce. It provided an alternative to British museums, which not only had taken significant objects, but also, according to Chaplunkar, did not permit Indian visitors to view them. Though Chaplunkar is critical of the British, he also remonstrated Indians for not preserving their own heritage. In Poona, he described an occasion where paintings of a local ruler and his wife were for sale. Rather than the pictures, customers were inquiring about their decorated frames. Appalled, he bought them, intent to create an accessible, inexpensive, mobile museum, as if fusing the British Museum or the V&A with the National Portrait Gallery, the latter founded largely at the instigation of Thomas Carlyle to offer a visual collection of the British nation's heroes. So he's doing this through his press. By searching far and wide for images, the publishers at the Chitrashala preserved a genealogy of portraits, but also of portraiture in Western India, from 18th century Maratha portraiture to the advent of British oil painting to photography and the lithographic print. The first image, for example, was sourced in a regional family collection. The artist translated an oil painting of Nana Fadnavis, the Maratha minister whom writers around 1900 considered to have the type of character and leadership that could once again lead to Maratha ascendancy, which had been produced by the British artist James Wales in Poona a century earlier. Other lithographs even more explicitly sought to pierce the enemy's heart through a visual program. One lightly colored series aligned Maratha leaders with those starring in the contemporary nationalist movement, explicitly forging a link between past and present. Warriors such as Malharao Holkar, who governed the region of the Marathas conquered around Indore on the left, are portrayed alongside the late 19th century inheritor princes of those states, such as the Maharaja of Baroda, who ruled as subservient governors and then native princes to the British after the fall of the Marathas in 1818. Similar to the composite photographs in the Poona Photographic Company album, these earlier Chitrashala images achieve a careful balance between their claims to historical legitimacy, techniques of representation, and identification. Thus, the Maharaja of Baroda's likeness is based on one of his photographs as an Indian prince and a British subject, wearing gold-embroidered military dress and a simple Maratha-style turban. The Maharaja sits confidently on an armchair with a bejeweled medal over his left breast, likely one of 3 bestowed on him by the British in the 1870s and 80s. And we can see that the Poona Photographic Company used a related image with associated swag. This style of portraiture followed the standards set by Bourne and Shepard during their tour of India between 1875 to 77 to document the princes of India for the Queen's accession as Empress. They photographed the Maharaja as a disgruntled yet regal child in the center that we see, his image passing to Victoria via photograph as hers would to him, their relationship mediated as she never came to the subcontinent. Malharao Holkar, on the other hand, is derived from an illustration in a British history, MacDonald's memoir of Nana Fadnavis, published in 1851. MacDonald seems to have used Maratha paintings from local collections, such as one akin to this. Contemporary intellectuals were also included, such as Justice Ranade, whose portrait fills one oval in the Poona Photographic Company album. Both the album and the Chitrashala thus seem to print particularly potent portraits that in collection and juxtaposition take on new meaning, using Victoria as a frame for an alternative vision of rule, if not a visual dissemination of a paragraph of Ranade's Rise of the Maratha Power, published around 1900, which promoted the Maharajas as well as leaders that came before, such as Nana Fadnavis, as the models and precursors for an independent federated India due to their moral strength and versatility. The intermediality of these images heightened such versatility. The Chitrashala preserved a genealogy of portraits that varied in medium, period, and subject. Their very variety, like that of the Poona Photographic Album, paralleled Justice Ranade's notion of a diverse confederacy as the key to political freedom. Such ingenuity is transposed onto the walls of another Chitrashala, or painting gallery, in the Saraswati Mahal Durbar Hall in Gwalior, another seat of the Marathas in North India. Maharaja Jayajirao Scindia built the hall in 1865, and it was painted after 1905 during the reign of his son, Maharaja Madhavrao Scindia I. Here, their oval portraits, bright with colored garments and clear faces, are framed against dark grounds within flowering reflective borders and molded lunettes. Chubby angels perch on swags of baroque flowers against a rich royal blue. By all accounts, the Scindias were loyal to the British, yet the Durbar Hall offers a remarkable visual symbiosis of a flexible historicist Maratha aesthetic that emerged and transformed through collecting practices, photography, and the printing press, subverting and confounding any notion of Britishness set loose by Victoria's image. Walls of painted portraits decorate palaces throughout India, yet the compositional format and riotous decor of the Durbar Hall seems modeled on a photographic album like that from the Poona Photographic Company. It is tempting to imagine that one of these albums had also been made and gifted to the Scindias, as it had been done for the Holkars. The style and format seems to have moved across media. A smaller painting of the Scindia Maharajas remains in the Palace Museum. It includes their oval portraits with floriated decor embellishing the page. These artists also placed the Scindia family as the locus of the composition in other paintings done on walls in the Scindia Palace complex, such as the one I'm showing you here, in which the Maharaja watches the dance a notch at the precise center of the hall, with his courtiers performing the perspectival lines. Look at the photographer on the bottom right. You can see his black camera. Yet, though the Scindias are central, the focus in the Durbar Hall is neither the relationship between ruler and ruled, or merely a gathering of political leaders for court or for entertainment, nor is it loyalty. The elder Scindia is centrally framed above the door. He turns to his left, focused on a distant view, which is in a chain of copies of a photograph that Samuel Bourne and Shepard had taken around 1875 during the Prince of Wales's visit to India. Below him, on either side of the door, are two of the main heroes who warded off British suzerainty. On the left is a portrait of Nana Fadnavis, which directly follows that of the Chitrashala print. Tipu Sultan, who infamously warded off the British, in part by allying with the French, is on the bottom right. Across the hall and above the door, Madhav Rao Scindia faces his father, Jayaji Rao Scindia, garbed in a flowing sky blue cape that could only be worn by holders of the Star of India. It is pinned with British medals. Van Dyck Studios portrayed him, for instance, in London in precisely this manner for the 1911 coronation. Both portraits identify the Scindias within the British Empire. Yet Napoleon is just to the right, in a brilliant red coat with hair flowing, as in Antoine Jean Gross's romantic portrait of the general at the Bridge of Arcole from 1796. He is depicted above 6 portraits of the Mughal emperors, who represent another genealogy of Indian rule. Napoleon was clearly antagonistic to the British, but Marathas felt a particular affinity towards him as a revolutionary. Marathi writers such as Chaplunkar considered Napoleon an exemplar, specifically because he unified various states into one country as a people's king, akin to Shivaji. To Napoleon's right, under the arch, are 2 figures who led the 1857 uprising against the British. Their armed portraits, brightly limbed, register as devious yet charming, in contrast to bleak British black and white photographs that memorialize the sites of their rebellion. And I want to point out that the bottom figure here, Nana Sahib, is the same Nana in Sean's wonderful paper. The British are not absent from this program. Queen Victoria is situated on the lower half of the wall, in precisely the same pose and format as the Poona Photographic Company album and Bassano's portrait. Her body faces the viewer. The blue sash that drapes across her black, gold, and white garment has been adapted into a sari-like fold, while her face turns towards a profile view. Her white lace veil cascades down her back, and the crown has shrunk considerably on her head. On the wall, she is placed above the last Mughal emperor, whom rebelling Indian sepoys appointed as their unifying leader during the uprising in 1857. In this context, the portrait of the queen becomes multivalent. The Chapekar brothers, for instance, whose portraits likely face each other across the hall in the lower right roundel and lower left lunette, violently used the imagery of Queen Victoria in 1897 after invoking Shivaji as their leader. Before assassinating the colonial official in charge of an ineffectual plague policy in Poona, they tarred Queen Victoria's statue and cut out her pictures from school textbooks and pasted them onto the bottom of old and tattered shoes, as if to become like a god such as Shiva, neck strung with skulls, who stomps and kills the demon underfoot. By evening, they had shot and killed the official, for which they were later hanged. This episode reveals the range of image use in this period. In the case of the Chapekar brothers, they symbolically defiled Queen Victoria's image before they committed a very real act of violence. Does Victoria leave the realm of monarchy to become one of the revolutionaries, the models or methods for rule, a Britishness recontextualized? The alternative to her queen is the founder and king of the Marathas, Shivaji, who is painted life-size within a pale yellow foliate border, descending from one of his forts on a galloping horse. He, like so many of the images on this wall, is based on another image, a print by the late 19th century oil painter Raja Ravi Varma, which in turn relied on a Mughal portrait and an icon of the warrior god Khandoba. He is not in the main portion of the hall, but in the sanctum alongside Hindu deities, wavering between a naturalistically rendered warrior and a god reincarnate. Astride his horse, he appears ready to lead the Revolutionary Guard coalesced across space and over time, from photographs and oil paintings, gouaches and chromolithographs, depicted unblinking yet poised on the walls of the adjacent room. At once individual portraits, together these images become a hovering, infectious, revolutionary guard that collapses time, drawing past and present heroes and heroines together, including Queen Victoria. Though based on circulating prints and photographs of potent revolutionary and historical figures, the paintings cease to work solely as individuals. In the tradition of Maratha wall painting, they take on a collective juxtaposition of narratives and icons to form an auspicious, inspirational, and devotional program that alighted with the format of the printed dynastic lineage and the imperial photographic album to become the material for revolution. Thank you.
Holly. We're running a little late, but I'd like to steal a few minutes from lunch so that we can continue the discussion. Thanks. I wanted to just start. The building it's so fascinating, and you described it as it almost appears like a collage and very reminiscent of those 19th century albums. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about the temporal aspects, and I was particularly struck by Victoria's kind of unchanging image, or a late 19th century image that persists and continues to be used after her death, and if you had thoughts about that.
Yeah, thanks so much. That's one thing that I think is so fascinating about this wall, as well as the images that were available, I'm guessing, in some ways. But part of what I think is quite special about this room, it's basically a room for ceremonial, would have been intimate but yet open to a certain realm of the public, is that it quite purposefully ignores temporal distance in order to kind of rally people from many generations and times that these rulers associated with or wanted, and I think this is really key, that they aspired or wanted to associate with. And in that sense, they are both references to people, but I think they're also references to those people as they lose personhood and potentially become divinized or semi-divine figures. And in that sense, it is connected to a tradition of Maratha wall painting that does this, bringing together kind of rulers from vast areas into one space. On terms of the temporality of Victoria's image, I also was quite struck because there definitely were images of Victoria that must have been available from later times. And my only guess is that this is the one that artists started to use as a model, and it kind of got stuck.
Other questions for Holly? No? Sarah?
Well, maybe this is for another moment when you're sat together, but I was struck by the relationships and the visual relationships and methodological ones as well between your paper and Sean's, and just thinking about the relationship between the album that Sean was talking about and what you were talking about here in this kind of splicing and separating and reconstruction. And I'm sure that was going around both of your heads as you were talking, so I didn't know whether you wanted to pick up on that. Yes. Oh, wow.
This got sliced from the talk. No, I really appreciate that because I was so excited to hear Sean's paper and to learn so much more about that, because in some respects I think that the wall paintings and the photographs I'm speaking about are almost like the back mirror, like the mirror image of, in some respects, Sean's album, and I obviously want to hear his thoughts and opinions on that. But in the same ways that within a society, revolutionaries are both in that unseen as well as pulled out afterwards, I think what you see in some of the Maratha cases is using similar methods of juxtaposition, but for almost completely opposite purposes. And I had pulled up one really fascinating collage from Poona, which has a painting of the last king to fall to the British, Bajirao II, and another Maratha revolutionary. And someone realized that those were connected and kind of completely ignoring the fact that they were from very different media, wanted to convey the notion of the portrait in their juxtaposition, as if to stress the potential for revolution in older figures. And so I think that in some ways, the painters of the walls that I'm working on were thinking about some of those same ideas of intermediality and both being hidden and available in some ways to view, but working again for quite opposite means.
But it is interesting how the format is, and especially this egg roundel, is employed in these very different formats. So those visual relationships and as well as the carte de visite I was thinking about, and the seriality that you were speaking of, is very striking just from these two papers. Yeah,
I completely agree, and I think one thing that's interesting, and I know I'm among such eminent photo scholars, but that the idea that a photograph can be so montaged that it's really not indexical in so many ways, that you can actually take images from the far past and place them next to a photograph that was taken yesterday, I think actually might not be so dissimilar from that use in a different format or a different media as in painting.